So, guys, thank you for coming and joining us tonight. This is a topic which what I wanted to do was have a conversation just to open people's eyes about what level of impact the human capital that you have in your practices is having on your practices. Um, and thank you. Everyone's piling in now saying you can hear us. Thanks, guys. That's fantastic. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so tonight's webinar is called The Scary Costs of Poor Recruitment. And I am delighted to be joined this evening by Paolo Lencioni. Welcome to the webinar tonight, Paolo.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for inviting me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, and for those of you that don't know Paolo, what we'll do is we'll just start with a couple of introductions. Okay, so we'll start with Paolo. That seems polite. Paolo is a gentleman for coming on here tonight. And Paolo is a very qualified individual indeed. So he's not only a veterinary surgeon and a former business owner, he's an accountant and something of an IT boffin as well. So he's pretty well known around the scene here in Australia. For his partner in APL Accountants, but also as the brains behind the Be Free software platform. And I thought it'd be great to have Paolo on with his double experience, one from in practice, because all of us here tonight are in practice, but also to be able to help put some numbers and to make the actual size of this problem more tangible. Now, what is interesting, and obviously we're kind of on the back of, there's been quite a few management presentations recently, and we're on the back of AVB have just done their performance management series with Rosie, and I thought what was interesting about a lot of the things that we talk about in management, whether it's marketing or managing our teams, unless we get the right tools to do the job, i.e. the right people in our practices, we really are handicapping ourselves most grievously. So what we're just going to do tonight is talk about how big a handicap these things are, because I've crunched the numbers and I was absolutely gobsmacked at just how big a problem this actually is. So let's continue and crack on with tonight's presentation. Okay, so we're going to go through, and there's really 6 things that I want to consider. I want you guys to consider out there, and please hang on right till the end of this webinar, because I've got a couple of cool resources, and I promised you a bit of a horror show and a fright show, and actually I'm going to flip this on you, and at the end of this I've got a calculator that you can download, and you can, in the privacy of your own clinic, and I would suggest a padded cell might be a good place to do this exercise, you can tot up the actual costs that are applicable to your practice as you currently stand, to get an idea of how much you are potentially losing right now, and the flip side is how much you could be making more. And we are not just talking about money here. So we're going to look at this from 6 perspectives. So the cost of the advert, the cost on your time recruiting somebody into the business, the lost sales that occur when you have the wrong person in your business, the impact on the other people around about you, your colleagues and your clients, the impact on your happiness, and quite how you put an actual figure on that is very, very hard, but it's there's ultimately a cost to having people that you are not enjoying working with in your business. And then if you have to repair the damage, which is a very pleasant euphemism for saying get rid of someone from your business, then that can also be extremely expensive as well. And in my experience working as a consultant, most people consider the cost of the ad, and they consider the cost spent of your time recruiting, and if they're very lucky, inducting someone into the business, but they haven't spent so much time thinking about the last 4. And the last 4 where things get genuinely, absolutely terrifying. Okay, so I'm going to talk about these, and Paolo, I'm just going to come to you and dip in with some numbers and some of your experiences, so they don't get too bored hearing my voice, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, for sure. I'll throw in some numbers. So I'll probably just chime in sometimes and throw in some numbers because we do this exercise with a lot of our clients. We analyze a lot of their figures, their KPIs. We only do veterinary clinics as an accounting firm, and this is one of our focuses. And I can put very, very solid numbers to a lot of these things. And some of you might want a defibrillator there because what's going to happen is I'm going to bring up numbers, and I can guarantee you some of you are going to have these numbers in your practices.
Oh yeah, and honestly, we'll all have these numbers in our practice to some extent or other. So they're very, very hard to eliminate. So okay, so let's get cracking. I'm conscious that this is the evening for you guys, and your time is valuable as well. So let's not waste any of it, and we'll just push straight on and talk about the job advert. Now, the job advert. Obviously here in Australia, we are blessed. We are blessed with the resource that we have with Kookaburra veterinary employment, and there is not another country in the world I'm aware of where you can post a job advert for as little as $300 or $400, and it runs and it pretty much brings you the raw materials you need. So we are very, very much blessed. I'm a huge fan of the Kookaburra service, and there's actually a really good recruitment group on Facebook as well. There's a Vets and Locums group, which is a great place to post your job ads as well. So the cost of the job ad here is actually not very high. It's not a scary cost. I mean, if we were in the UK, then you're looking at £2,000 for a 4-week print ad in the Vet Record, and you can't publish something online. It just doesn't exist there. So I think we're kind of really advanced in that regard. So the cost of posting an advert per se is not necessarily a terribly expensive or scary cost, but I want you to consider this. Many people use agencies, and the first scary cost in recruitment is really the only place where the agency fee actually applies, because agencies are only there to give you a CV at the end of the day. And the scary cost that you can end up spending with agencies is it can be up to about 18% of first year salary. So, if you're paying a vet 100,000 a year, then 18 grand is not an insignificant amount of money. It's certainly not in my budget. I would hate to have to fork that out for something that is just a CV at the end of the day. However vetted it's supposed to have been, it's just a CV. And you're still going to have to make your own set of assessments and judgments about that person. So when I say the scary cost of the job advert, I also mean because lots of people do use the agencies, and as far as I can see, they seem to be fighting over very much the same pool of people. So there's your first cost, is up to about 18% of your first year salary. Now, that's your entry level for number one cost, and these costs increase incrementally as we go through the slides. So let's push on to scary costs.
Can I chime in there, Dave?
Sure.
And maybe what people don't realise is, people are very cost averse and they look at a few $100 to put in a job ad. But doesn't it make sense to you, Dave, to actually get some help? Look at putting the right ad in. So it might cost you a little bit more to get someone to help you produce a nice advertisement that attracts the right kind of person in the first place, and actually that cost would be negligible, comparable to actually recruiting the wrong person. So what I'm saying is, here in the job advert, don't worry too much about the cost, but do spend a little bit of time and even get a little bit of help in getting these adverts right so that you attract the right kind of person. And then once you have the right kind of advertisements, you can recycle them and reuse them. But don't be shy to spend a little bit of money on getting this first step right. Would you agree with that, Dave?
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I mean, you look at the adverts. I mean, even when you do post them in a great location like Kookaburra, they very much all look the same. It's the same list of bullet points. It's the same. I always joke that it's the word progressive. Every veterinary practice is progressive, and I'm really not entirely sure what that word means, but everyone uses it. And I like to play, the buzzword bingo when I'm looking at job adverts, and I encourage you to do this. Just go straight on to Kookaburra, or flick open a copy of the AVA Journal, anywhere you find job adverts, and count the number of times you see the word progressive. But I would heartily recommend not making this a drinking game, because you will be drunk as a skunk by the time you get 10 minutes into the game. So don't do that. Yeah, so Paolo, completely agree, and I'll talk a wee bit more about that at the end of the presentation. So good point. Okay, so let's move on to scary cost number 2, and now we amp it up a little bit. So it's your time training and inducting a new person into the business. Now, again, lots and lots of people don't do induction, which is insane, and I'm going to assume that anybody who's willing to spend an hour of their time after a hard day in the office is probably somebody who's more likely to have even a rudimentary induction program into your practice. Well, let me tell you about the induction program I had when I left the UK, and we estimated that it took me 2 weeks. I spent a solid 2 weeks shadowing a member of new hire in the practice, and they were not, for large swathes of that time, they were not going in the consult room. They were just learning how to use the practice management system, how to bill, how to use our price list, what were our values, what were our objectives. We were drilling them with the skills they needed to survive within the business. And that took roughly 2 weeks of time. Now, my time as a manager, I could have been working on marketing campaigns that could have brought in, another $50,000 worth of business. I could have been doing real sort of $1,000 an hour work, but and I'm not saying that training people isn't highly valuable. It is. I'm just saying there is a cost involved in your direction of these people, when you're not doing something else you might be doing. Now, obviously, if you sit in your office, playing on Facebook all day long, then you're not using your time terribly wisely. But a good manager, a good business owner would be working on marketing otherwise. And if you're not doing that, then you're losing money. So there's a cost, and we estimated at Part Vets that cost would have been probably about £1,000 a day for me to sit there, and then the vet that I was training had the potential to make £1,000 a day in revenue for the business as well. And you do that over a couple of weeks, and pretty quickly the numbers start adding up. Now, you could argue you'd have a locum doing the work. You could certainly say that you'd have a bum on a seat somewhere doing it, and that may be true. But there is always a cost involved when you're taken away from other strategic work you would be doing to work on something tactical, which is what induction is. It's very much a tactical activity. And the difference, I'll just dwell on that for a second, the difference between something strategic and something tactical is strategic is where you're sitting thinking about something, and tactical is where you're actually doing something within your business. That's the simplest definition I can give you. And the strategic stuff is often the most important stuff, thinking of a new direction, thinking about new ideas, new opportunities. These are really important things that get overlooked a lot in veterinary practices, and one of the reasons that practices do stagnate. So you are looking at, put into dollar terms, even if you took a week, I think that you could easily be spending something like $20,000 or $30,000. Not just could be, should be spending $20,000 or $30,000 of invested time training a new hire. But if you get the hire wrong, then that's wasted. If that person walks out and does not pass their 3-month probation, then that money is completely wasted and is not being recovered by your business at all. So it just is madness to not take a bit of time in choosing the correct person. Okay.
Dave, have you got any experience? What would be your feeling before a person gets up to speed and are actually productive? How long would you say your estimate is, from when you take someone on average before they're actually a productive employee, as a ballpark figure?
Okay, that's a good question, and I would say there's a couple of inputs into there. So I actually do have a process whereby I look for and I hire new grads, and I look for them to be a profitable member of my team within 3 months.
That's exactly the figure I had. I was wondering what you were thinking. We find that on the accounting side is 3 months is the induction period for an employee. So you run those costs for 3 months, so a quarter of a year.
That's right.
And remember, if you're a business that does recruit good people but can't keep them, every time a staff member leaves, if you're not keeping your people happy, then you're going through these costs again and again. So if your turnover is very high, say double a normal business, then you're doubling up on these costs. So it is significant.
I absolutely agree, and I'd actually say for people who've come in from not a veterinary background, I actually feel like it takes a lot longer for reception staff. I know that not like lots of practices use nurses on reception, but I use dedicated receptionists because I think the nurse and the reception roles are very, very different things and different skill sets. And I actually feel like it actually takes my receptionist a good year to get really up to speed. And I think that's as much a reflection on sometimes the difficulty of coming into our world as vets is really different. And also, it's just a really, really hard job to do well, to do really well, where they're then able to, deal with a million things that are getting thrown at them and sell stuff, sell things to your clients. And I feel like that's the most important role of a receptionist. So I do feel like it varies, and I know that may not be what everybody thinks. A lot of people think, oh, you hire a new grad, then you're just going to be taking a hit for a good year, then they just leave. But that's not true if you've got the right induction program. But if you don't have the right induction program, then that scary cost gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So I guess there's one hidden cost there, that if you don't do it, then you don't do that induction training, then the costs that follow, and now we're into scary cost number 3, are incrementally bigger and scarier. Okay, so if you hire the wrong person into your business, and let's stay focused on the individual right now. And Paolo, I'm probably going to use you pretty heavily here to highlight this one, because I reckon you'll have seen the full.
I've seen a lot of this. Yeah.
Can I ask you one question, Paolo? What is the difference in terms of annual revenue between a really top performing vet and a really poor performing vet, and what's about average?
Okay, so the average vet in Australia turns over 416,000 per year, exclusive of GST. That's quite a consistent. We work that average out. We do this on over 100 practices every year. So the average revenue per vet is around 416,000 per year. A good performing vet can be in excess of 600,000, and a poor performer can be in the region of 300,000 or just under 300,000. So you're looking at a big difference. We did this. We see this all the time, and looking at annual revenue per vet in practices is an exercise we do with every single client of ours. And we look at 2 key performance indicators in veterinary practices. We look at the revenue each vet turns over, and we look at average transaction fee for each vet. And those are very, very good key performance indicators. And this is true story. We have a client that had 4 vets. Now, the one thing you've got to look at is, do all those vets perform the same role? And the answer here was yes. They all did the same amount of consulting, the same amount of surgery, because obviously that has a bearing on how their revenue is going to look. All 4 vets did the same thing, and consistently 2 of those 4 vets turned over $100,000 less than the other 2. Okay, there's no real reason for this. Okay, so then I asked the business owner, how long have these 2 vets worked for you? And it was 5 years.
Oh, dear.
All right, so that's $200,000 over 5 years. You're looking at $1 million. So it's not small. Now, I challenge all of you who are at this thing to go back to your practices, consider the roles of your vets, obviously, and look at the turnover if they've got the same role, and look at their average transaction fee. And if you see vets there with the same role at 20% or less than your other vets, then this is the cost you're footing at the moment is in excess of $100,000 a year. It's not small money at all, and it's not smoke and mirrors. When these practices have replaced these individuals, or these individuals have moved on, their replacements have performed on a par with the other vets. So it's a real cost, but it's what we call in accounting an opportunity cost, and you don't notice it. As a business owner, you look there and you say, oh, my marketing bill costs so much, my wholesaler bill is so expensive, and you see money you're paying out, but you don't see the money that you're losing by a lack of lost opportunities, and that's actually the bigger danger in practice, is this kind of cost. It's a huge issue.
That's pretty scary. Now, I've got one other question. I've got a little poll for you there, actually. The question I've put into this poll, and hopefully something pops up on your screen. I must admit, I've never. There's a poll there's a poll just beneath in the chat box there. I just asked a simple question: is undercharging an issue for you? The answer, you got two options. You got yes, no, and there's a little ghost blank option there. I was going to put in hell yes, but I felt that might bias the vote somewhat. So if you want to just click on that and vote, and then I'll just give you 30 seconds to find that poll. So it's on the sidebar on the right hand side, and the question is undercharging an issue for you?
Can you clarify that, Dave, as to what you mean by that? Is it an issue? Are your vets undercharging?
Right. Are your vets undercharging? Are your vets undercharging?
Okay.
So is that something that you feel is a problem in your practice? So if your vets are not billing the prices that you think or that you know are the correct prices for your practice, is that an issue? So I'll just give that another 10 seconds and then I'll end the poll. And I'm asking this for a reason, because I've done some research in this area and it's really, really scary. So 100% of people said yes, undercharging is an issue for you. Well, surprise, surprise. Okay, so a little bit of a leading question, but here's the thing. When I've looked at this, and I've waded through so many bills in my role as performance director back in the UK for a 45 vet clinic, and I waded through bills after bills after bills, and there were things kept coming up again and again and again. I was able to distill the reasons for why people were undercharging down into 4 crucial issues. And if you like, this might be your takeaway from tonight. This might be the reason why an hour of your time was well spent. But basically, the first reason that people undercharge is because they are just confused about what the hell your price list is. They just don't know. Nobody took the time out to teach them what the price list was. And I've worked in some really good practices that are seen in the market as being the market leaders, where there was not a day of induction. They walked in and just let me loose on the price list. Absolute insanity. So just confusion about not knowing what is meant to be charged. The next one is carelessness. So people being sloppy. Rushing through their day, headless chicken stuff, and they bill on everything, and whoop, before you know it, the anesthetic fee was missing. And there's $200-300 worth of the bill gone. Now, if your bill would have been $1,000 and you just lost 300 of it, then you're going to be in a tough spot for making profit when you start missing things like that off of the list. Now, the next one is I call it clipping, and that's a nice way of saying somebody didn't do an estimate, they did a guesstimate. And back in Part Vets, there was this running joke amongst the assistants. I wasn't a manager at the time, I was an assistant. I was 2 or 3 years out of college. And we were sat around in a bar one night and everyone was going, what did you see today? And I said, I saw a lame dog. And said, how much was it? I said, it's about £400 to work it up. And I went, I said, what do you see? I said, I saw a lump on a dog. And I said, well, how much did you charge? It's about £400. This went around the table and everyone was charging £400 for things. Now, mine should have been £400. Everyone else's that was around there was something surgical and should have been maybe £600-700. But there was a groupthink thing that happened that everything was £400. Every time they put a price list in, price increase in of 5% every year, but the actual cost to the client of doing a cruciate ligament injury or a dental didn't change, because everyone had in their head what the price for something was, not how long something took. So every time the pricing went up, they just massaged things down. Every time we guessed, because there was no estimating policy, every time we guesstimated something, we then come to bill it up and go, oh man, I'm £300 over the top here. Well, what can I massage down? Well, surgical time. It took me half an hour, but hey, there's 20 minutes. No one will see that. Oh, there was 3 packs of suture material. There's 2. No one will see that. And there was just this culture of undercharging, and that exists in almost every practice I have ever done consultancy in, which is flabbergasting. And then the final one is, for me, the unforgivable sin. That's charity. People making up their own price list. Now, the first three things on that list are all remediable with proper training. If people are trained right in the systems and the techniques, they don't run around like headless chickens. If they're trained in what the price list is and how to use a computer system, then they know what to charge and when. And if they have estimate training and price list training, then they don't do guesstimates. So the scary cost of recruiting the wrong people is also tied to the scary cost of not doing induction on people properly. Okay. And I was on a webinar with Sam Bowden last night, and very interesting point he made was that most vets are not financially motivated. Most vets are mentally, vets hate rejection. We hate confrontation, and we want to be loved and accepted. They're sort of universal things about vets, which explains why when confronted with a bill that's quite big, we wilt time and time and time again, because we don't want to have a fight with a client, so we would rather knock the bill back. Well, if you're hiring people with that as a predominant tendency in their profile, then you are really going to have a hard time making them behave in any way differently. That all making sense to you, Paolo?
It makes total sense to me, and yeah, like we call it all sorts of different things. We call it misbilling, we call it all sorts of things, where they're clipping or they're not, estimating properly, or they're massaging prices down. But yeah, it all comes down to the recruit and the person, and training that person correctly, setting expectations, setting goals, having a proper appraisal system in place, so your staff know what the expectation is. So a lot of these issues are addressed by recruitment and managing your staff correctly, definitely.
Okay, cool, thank you. Now, before we go on to scary cost number 4, if you do have any questions that you want to ask, just pop them in the chat box, and me and Paolo, we'll get to them at the end, and we'll ask you a few. We'll go through a few of those questions at the end if you have any. Okay, but let's get on to the increasingly scary costs now. We're on to number 4. And this is where the microscope comes off the focus on the individual and starts to then fan out to the rest of the team. Okay, and this is where it genuinely gets terrifying. Okay, so you thought the difference between like 100,000 or 200 or 300,000 between a good and a bad vet would be. Now imagine you've got 4 or 5 vets in your practice, and you hire in the person who is manipulative or is grumpy or doesn't fit and likes to argue with everyone all the time. It really doesn't take an awful long time before that person is bringing everybody's level of performance down. Or you bring in somebody who's just not capable of doing the job you brought them in to do. So this person comes in, and now they're doing their job wrong. And I can speak from personal experience of this. I hired in a nurse, and she was all energy. Looked like, everything was this, I have to say, was before I started using the system I now use. But she looked like she fit in well with the team, and she looked busy. She was a busy person. These busy people that they just are busy being busy. Well, she was one of those. The problem was she wasn't busy doing her job well. And the problems started seeping out. And basically the big impacts were that the things that she was doing were having her job not well, were having impacts on clients. So she wouldn't order food or drugs. She would say she'd done it, but she wouldn't follow the procedure, or she'd forget, or she'd get distracted and do something else. So clients were coming in, and typically either we'd have to refund them something, or give them something for free to keep them happy, or another member of the team would then be dealing in reception with an unhappy client rather than answering the phones, and then they would have to then redo the job the first person should have done in the first instance. So now I'm paying for that job to get done twice. And the rest of the team is starting to become disgruntled because this person keeps making mistakes. Now, if they're a nice person, that's really, really scary, because we're nice people as vets as well for the most part. You don't want to get rid of somebody in that situation. It's horrible to do that, right? We don't ruin anyone's day. So you keep them. You think, they'll come good. They'll come good. They're just young. But that's not what happens. What happens is the rest of the team see your weakness and start to get disenchanted and start to think, well, if that's the performance standard that's acceptable, why should I keep my bar here? and the overall performance starts to drop. Now, if you have that as a nurse, or worse still, a manager, or worse still, you're the boss, you're this person, then you are in an enormous pile of poo-poo, because you impact. Do you see how restrained I was there, Paolo?
Very good, Dave. I was so impressed by that.
Are you
Thank
impressed?
you.
That's I have a 16-month-old daughter. I have to be careful with my language, you know. But let's not take away from the impact. If you have that problem, then the rest of your team is being affected. And there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that this, and not just in my mind, I've seen this on the ground. I've seen, and when I've gone in and I've been the bad person and taken out the person that was a problem, I've seen a lift in revenue of the vets who are interacting with that person by 10%, just because they were happy to come back into work. And I've also seen that
I agree with you there, Dave. I'll let you finish, but I'll chime in when you're done. Yeah.
Okay. So the final scary part of this is, if you don't deal with it, then your good people, they won't hang around. They won't put up with this forever. So that bad person starts to cause rifts within the team. Not directly, they can be friends with them, but those people are not going to put up with poor performance, because good performers won't do that indefinitely. And pretty soon you've got a beat down morale, and you've got good people who are ready to leave your business. And then you're right back to the start. And if your forte is hiring in these poor people, and you got lucky and got a couple of good people, then chances are you're not going to replace good with good. Chances are you're going to get unlucky, and you're going to hire more poor people in. Now, that is a terrifying vicious cycle to be in, and that is a cycle that I've seen many, many times in practices as well, principally because we're too scared to deal with it, because we don't like the conflict, because we're scared of what's going to happen. Well, we should be way more scared of what is happening in our businesses when this is a situation. Paolo, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't think there'll be a single business owner who hasn't had to deal with this particular issue. You're certainly not immune to it. We're not immune to it as an accounting firm. We weren't immune to it when we were vets. And even from personal experience, not that long ago, we had a recruit in our accounting firm, and Anne and I were just a little bit concerned about the attitude. They were pretty good, we thought, but we were concerned about the attitude they had to some of our clients. Eventually, we let them go, and freed up the future is a positive way of saying that. And the day after we got rid of them, one of our best employees came up to us and said, "Thanks for doing that, because I was about to leave." Apparently, there'd been some workplace bullying that we hadn't noticed. And then on our next few client visits, I would say there were probably 3 or 4 clients who said to us that this particular individual had been rude to them on the phone. So my thing is, and now we have quite a solid concept at our firm, is we take on the moral high ground as the leaders. Anne and I make every single effort to be positive and motivational. We greet every member of staff when we come in. We really try and keep the vibe high. But if at any point in time we feel there is a single employee where we sit down and think, gee, this guy's actually making my life harder, not easier, and that's simply the question I ask myself: is this person making my life easier, or are they making my life harder? If the answer is harder, they go no matter what the cost. I deal with the repercussions later.
I think that is actually that's one of the most simple ways of putting it I've ever heard, Paolo. I like that. Anne
and I go to the coffee shop and we have do they make our life easier or harder discussion.
Yeah, right. I think that's awesome.
Basically,
yeah.
That's basically it. If they're draining your energy, then you're paying them for nothing. They're making your life harder.
Well, that segues very nicely into scary cost number 5, and is in fact the reason why I ended up. Why I started writing my blog, why I go around the country and speak to people, is because, I don't think you can put a cost on it. What's the cost of all of your education, all of your time, all of your energy spent getting good at what you do, and then going sour and not wanting to go into your practice because it's full of people that you hate? Now, that is entirely your fault. of course. But it's still a very, very sad situation. And it goes beyond that. And the reason we've got the little bomb there with the fuse is people go past that point. They get into hopelessness. They get isolated and they do things that they don't come back from. And that's, that's true of vets, whether you're in Australia or the UK or the US, any of the developed country, we top that really unenviable chart, the suicide lists. Okay, I think that is particularly sad, and would love to see that change about our profession. And this is just a cumulative effect of getting ground down and ground down. And it's what is worse, dealing with your situation now, or getting to a point where you feel so helpless that the only way out is a final way out. I think that is the I had a real toss up between, this one is hard to put an actual cost on, and I guess Paolo, you could put a cost on it as an accountant, because if we don't get dramatic and go extreme, then you're not going to want to be in your business. You'll spend time on the golf course. I love my practices. I love working on them. I love doing it. I love going in there, and it's what I'm here to do. Compare that to the business owner who is just over it, doesn't want to go in, is not driving the strategy, is not directing things, isn't working on marketing, isn't training the team. Paolo, and when it comes to selling time, well, there's
Dave, you're painting a pretty picture here. I think the owners that are in the state aren't on the golf course enjoying themselves. I wish they were, because then they wouldn't have a problem. The problem is when you don't have staff that you can count on and depend on, you're actually grinding away in the business working for nothing. Because you're carrying all the load. So in fact, these business owners aren't on the golf course. I wish they were, because I always have a saying, I'd rather be making no money and doing nothing than making no money and working my butt off. So so the happiness situation is actually it's a much uglier picture than that, to be honest. It's business owners working like crazy, making very little money, and that's what I hate to see. So yeah, I agree with you. This happiness effect, and like I said before, it exactly goes to, if I'd known, I would have said it when I saw the slide, is, are they making your life easier or harder? If they're making your life harder, then they're not right for you, and they're not right for your business. It's not a myth. We've worked really hard at getting the right people, and it doesn't happen by accident. But when you get the right people, it's just like a well-oiled machine. People just do work for you, and you suddenly realize that they are doing so work for you, as opposed to having people who are just not pulling their weight and making your life harder. So yeah.
Now, Paolo, tell me about this one. So your previous example was of somebody who'd had somebody working for them for 5 years, with labor laws the way they are. Doing this wrong so getting rid of somebody that you want to get out of the business, means and ways, it's perfectly possible to do. And you should, if you're good at management, you should never actually have to fire anybody again. But if you do it the wrong way, there's essentially no limit on how much you can get charged for inappropriate dismissal, right?
Yeah, look, this is a very tricky area, and one sometimes you need a lawyer to navigate this one. But that said, it's not uncommon now. Again, Anne and I are visiting our clients at all the veterinary practices, and we were at the UBG boot camp at dinner the other day speaking to some people, and it amazes us how many people have been taken to Fair Work. It's absolutely crazy. And the one we had a chap sitting with us at dinner at the UBG boot camp the other night, and one of the staff members they laid off had actually been stealing from them, and they laid. There were witnesses. There was proof. This person had been stealing from them. They laid off, and they still ended up in Fair Work. So it is really biased towards the employee. But when this sort of thing happens, take the approach of performance managing them out. There's different ways of doing it. If you really stuck and you think there's going to be problems, use a consultant so you get some advice on the legalities of it. But it is an issue. It's more and more common over the last few years. Anne and I have noticed more and more clients with these sort of issues. They often contact us about them, and it is rife at the moment, this sort of thing.
Yeah, poor performance is, I think, generally rife. But the scary cost six. If you trot back through these costs and add them up, then it really doesn't. Now, here's a question for you, okay? Um, and I'm not gonna do this in a poll, but perhaps you can just put in the chat box. And if you've been on any of my talks before, then don't cheat, okay? But tell me exactly what do you think is the cost of a poor hire? And we're talking in a year, okay? So how much does this poor hire, given the six costs I've just put to you just now, these six areas, how much do you reckon, on average, it costs you to have the wrong person as a multiple of salary? Okay, is it a quarter of their salary, half their salary, 20 times their salary? What do you think? Just fire something in the chat box there, and let's see if any of you get it right. Now, I'm afraid there isn't a prize for getting this right, but it's a real eye opener. And I was I was doing doing a presentation last year's AVB on the Move, and we were up in Queensland, and I asked this question of the audience, and people were shouting out the usual things. And I'll put you out your misery here. One guy in the corner sits upright, looking really gruff, folded arms, and he goes, four times their base salary. And I went, why do you say that? And he went, experience. And he had the sort of look on his face where I really didn't feel like arguing. And in actual fact, that is true. It can be four times the base salary. And you can see how easily those numbers add up when you start looking at some of the things that we've got going on here. So Peter and James, yeah, you're on the money. Actually, studies have come out of the UK, the Chartered Institute of Personal Development, to show it can be up as high as 14 times base salary. So if you're just getting taken for four times, then you might think that's a good day at the office. Perhaps not. This is what I want to share with you. Okay, we're kind of getting to the end of the presentation, and the purpose of this presentation is twofold. One, I want you to have a real motivation to do something different and to have opened up your eyes to say, okay, that's a problem. Because, and genuinely, I mean this, if you have a team that is making your life hell, as Paulo says, if they're more trouble than they're worth having around, more trouble to have them to not have them, then that's the first place you need to start acting on in your business. There is no point sending new clients into your practice because they're going to be getting a bad experience. There is no point trying to performance management. You are not going to take a 3 or a 4 and turn them into a 10 with any amount of performance management. It is not possible, and it will sap you of energy faster than anything else you try and do. The only thing you should do is start finding good people, or get rid of your bad and then start finding good people. That is the fastest way to a happy, healthy life as a veterinary practice owner. And anyone else that says anything different, and you guys that know me know I love my marketing, and that's my number one preference, but there is no point putting your head in the sand over this. If you've got bad people, then the rest of it is a sideshow until you get your team full of good people. So we have this little calculator, and so go to there, bit.ly, I don't know if you're familiar with the website, it's just a shortened URL. There's a little download you can go to there if you are brave enough. But so it's a little Excel spreadsheet, and you just put in some assumptions on your hourly rate. You can play around with it, the number of hours you spend managing people who are a problem, and watch what happens at the end as to how much more money you could be making if you get this right, if you get good people in your business.